My name is James Crawford. I'm 73 years old, and I spent 50 years of my life pouring water into a bucket full of holes, convinced that if I just poured faster, harder, more desperately, eventually the bucket would fill up and I'd finally feel like I was enough. It never filled up. Not once. Not even close. I'm not talking about a literal bucket. I'm talking about something far more dangerous and far more common. I'm talking about the endless, exhausting, soul-crushing pursuit of trying to prove your worth through things that exist outside of you. Titles, salaries, houses, cars, applause, approval, the nod from someone you respect, the envy in someone's eyes when you tell them what you do for a living, the quiet satisfaction of watching someone realize you've done well for yourself. I chased all of it for 5 decades, and I caught most of it. That's the part nobody warns you about. You can actually catch the things you're chasing. You can get the promotion, buy the house, earn the salary, win the award, impress the people you wanted to impress. You can stand at the top of the mountain you spent your whole life climbing and look out at the view everyone told you would change everything and feel absolutely nothing. Not nothing in a dramatic, cinematic way. Not a dark emptiness that makes for a good movie scene. Just a flat, gray, confusing nothing. A quiet voice in the back of your head saying, "Is this it? Is this what I traded all those years for?" That's what happened to me. And I want to tell you about it. Not because my story is special. It isn't. It's painfully ordinary. That's exactly why it matters. Because there are millions of people right now, at this very moment, running the same race I ran, pouring into the same leaking bucket, convinced that the next achievement will be the one that finally makes them feel whole. It won't. And I need you to hear that from someone who knows. I grew up in a household where worth was measured by visible accomplishment. My father was a hard-working man, honest, decent, reliable, but he carried a deep, unspoken shame about never having gone to college. He worked at a manufacturing plant for 34 years. Good job, steady paycheck, kept the family fed and housed without fail. But in his mind, he had fallen short of something, some invisible standard that he never clearly defined, but that colored everything he said and did. He never told me directly that I needed to achieve great things to be valuable as a human being. He didn't have to. It was in the way he talked about other people. The neighbor who got promoted. Now there's a man who's going somewhere. The cousin who bought a new car. Must be doing something right. The colleague's son who got into a prestigious university. A look of genuine admiration mixed with something that looked a lot like pain. The message was clear without ever being spoken. Your worth is determined by what you accomplish, what you earn, what you accumulate, what other people can see when they look at your life from the outside. I absorbed that message like a sponge absorbs water. It went deep into me, deeper than conscious thought, deeper than logic, deeper than any counter-argument could reach. It became the operating system running silently beneath everything I did for the next 50 years. And I didn't even know it was there. I started chasing early. In school, I chased grades, not knowledge, grades. There's a critical difference. Knowledge is about understanding something because it genuinely interests you. Grades are about proving to someone else that you understood it well enough to earn their approval. I wasn't curious, I was performing. Every test, every paper, every class was an audition for worthiness. I graduated near the top of my class. Felt good for about a week. Then the feeling faded and I needed the next thing. College was the same pattern amplified. I chose my major not based on what fascinated me, but based on what would lead to the most impressive sounding career. I wanted people to ask me what I did for a living and watch their eyebrows go up. That reaction, that split-second expression of being impressed, became my drug. I arranged my entire life around manufacturing that moment in other people's faces. I got my first real job at 23, entry-level position at a financial firm. Decent salary, nothing extraordinary. But I remember the day I got the offer letter. I called my father, told him the company name, the title, the salary. There was a pause on the line, and then he said, "Well, that's something, James. That's something." 3 words. And I rode the high of those 3 words for months. My father had acknowledged that I had become something, that I was going somewhere, that the invisible standard he carried, the one he never named, was being met. But the high faded. It always fades. That's the nature of external validation. It's not a meal. It's a snack. It takes the edge off for a moment, but it never satisfies the deeper hunger. And the more snacks you consume, the more you need to feel anything at all. By my 30s, the chase had become the organizing principle of my entire existence. Everything I did was filtered through one question: will this make me look successful? I worked 60-hour weeks, not because the work required it. Much of it was performative presence, showing up early and leaving late so people would see me and register my dedication. I volunteered for high-visibility projects, not because I cared about them, but because they came with recognition. I networked relentlessly, not to build genuine relationships, but to accumulate people who might be useful in advancing my position. I got promoted several times. Each promotion came with a title bump, a salary increase, and approximately 72 hours of satisfaction before the next target appeared on the horizon. I bought a bigger house. Felt good for about a month. Then I noticed my colleague Martin had a bigger one. I traded in my car for something more expensive. Felt good until I saw what the regional director was driving. I took my family on vacations to places that sounded impressive when I mentioned them at work. The actual experience of being there mattered less than the story I'd tell afterward. Catherine noticed. Of course she did. She was living with a man who was physically present but emotionally elsewhere, always scanning the horizon, always calculating the next move, always measuring the distance between where he was and where he thought he needed to be. She said to me once, during a quiet argument that never quite escalated into a real fight, "James, I don't think you want a life. I think you want a resume." I dismissed it, told myself she didn't understand the pressure I was under, the expectations, the competitive reality of my industry. I had a family to provide for, and providing meant succeeding, and succeeding meant more hours, more effort, more visible achievement. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say, because I didn't understand it myself yet, was that I wasn't doing any of it for my family. I was doing it for me, for the terrified, inadequate version of me that had been running the show since childhood. The version that heard his father say, "That's something," and decided that if something was good, more would be better, and enough would never exist. By my late 40s, I had more money than my father ever dreamed of. I had a beautiful home, a respected position, a circle of professional acquaintances who treated me with deference. On paper, I had won the game I'd been playing since I was a teenager, and I was miserable. Not the kind of miserable that's obvious to other people. I still smiled at parties, still performed confidence and success and satisfaction with practiced ease, still told the stories that made my life sound enviable. But underneath all of it, underneath the suits and the handshakes and the carefully curated image, there was a gnawing, relentless anxiety that never went away. Because here's the thing about building your entire identity on external validation. It means your sense of self is permanently dependent on things you can't control. Other people's opinions, market conditions, the next quarterly review, whether someone above you notices your work, whether someone beside you outperforms you. You become a hostage to approval. Every compliment is a temporary reprieve. Every criticism is a death sentence. Every day without visible recognition is a day spent wondering if you're slipping, falling behind, becoming irrelevant. I couldn't enjoy a vacation without checking my email. Couldn't sit through a family dinner without mentally rehearsing tomorrow's presentation. Couldn't watch my son's school play without calculating how many hours of work I was missing. The wealth didn't help. That's what surprised me most. I genuinely believed, with absolute unexamined certainty, that reaching a certain financial threshold would quiet the voice in my head that kept saying, "Not enough." But the threshold kept moving. Every time I reached it, it shifted further up the mountain like a mirage in the desert. 100,000 wasn't enough because the people around me were making 200. 200 wasn't enough because the real players were making 5. 500 wasn't enough because there was always someone with more, and more was the only language my internal scorecard spoke. The bucket had holes. It always had holes. And no amount of water was ever going to fill it, because the holes were the point. The holes were the design. My entire system of self-worth was built on a foundation that was structurally incapable of holding what I kept pouring into it. The chase cost me things that money couldn't buy back. That's not a cliché. That's an accounting statement. It cost me years with my children. Robert and Elizabeth grew up with a father who was more like a weather system than a person, occasionally warm, frequently distant, and always moving towards something they couldn't see and didn't understand. I attended their events when I could. I provided for them generously. But presence isn't the same as being present, and they knew the difference even when I didn't. Robert told me once, years later, when he was old enough to say it without anger, "Dad, you were always there, but you were never really there. It was like living with someone who was permanently looking over our heads at something more important." That sentence hit me harder than anything anyone has ever said to me, because it was true, completely, specifically, devastatingly true. It cost me the best years of my marriage. Catherine stayed. She stayed through all of it. The obsessive work hours, the emotional absence, the conversations that never went deeper than schedules and logistics. She stayed because she loved me, and because she kept hoping the man she'd married would eventually come back from wherever he'd gone. But staying isn't the same as thriving. And a marriage where one person is permanently chasing something external while the other person waits at home isn't a partnership. It's a holding pattern. Catherine deserved a husband who was fully in the room. She got one who was always halfway out the door, mentally rehearsing his next performance for an audience that wasn't his family. It cost me friendships, real ones, the kind that require vulnerability, honesty, and the willingness to be seen as you actually are, rather than as you want to be perceived. I couldn't afford that kind of exposure. Letting someone see the real me, the anxious, inadequate, perpetually frightened me, would have destroyed the image I'd spent decades constructing. So I kept everyone at arm's length, behind the polished surface, where they could admire me but never actually know me. It cost me my health. The stress alone, the constant grinding low-grade stress of maintaining a performance 24 hours a day, did things to my body that I'm still dealing with. Blood pressure, heart issues, insomnia that lasted years. My body was keeping score even when I refused to. The break didn't come dramatically. There was no collapse, no public failure, no rock bottom in the Hollywood sense. It came quietly, on an ordinary Wednesday evening, in the most mundane way imaginable. I was 61 years old. I had just received a significant award from my industry, a recognition of career achievement that I'd been quietly hoping for years. The ceremony was impressive. The speech was flattering. People I respected shook my hand and said genuine, admiring things about my contributions. I drove home afterward with the award on the passenger seat, pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there. Catherine had left the porch light on for me. Through the window, I could see the living room lamp was still on, which meant she'd waited up. She was always waiting up, always leaving lights on, always keeping a door open for a man who was perpetually arriving late from somewhere that mattered less than where he already was. I looked at the award, a heavy engraved piece of glass mounted on a wooden base, my name in gold letters, a testament to decades of achievement. And I felt the same thing I'd felt after every promotion, every raise, every milestone I'd spent my life pursuing. Nothing. Not nothing as in absence of emotion, something worse than nothing, a sickening recognition, a clarity that felt like being punched in the stomach by your own reflection. This was never going to work. The strategy I'd built my entire life around, earn more, achieve more, impress more, and eventually the emptiness will fill, was fundamentally, structurally, irreparably broken. It had never worked, not once, not for a single sustained moment in 50 years of relentless effort. I had spent half a century pouring water into a bucket with holes in the bottom and calling it progress. I left the award in the car, went inside. Catherine was on the couch with a book she wasn't really reading. She looked up and smiled, the same patient, warm, slightly sad smile she'd been giving me for 30 years. I sat down next to her, close, closer than I'd sat in years. And I said something I'd never said before, not to her, not to anyone, not even to myself. I don't think any of it was ever enough, because I never believed I was enough without it. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just took my hand and held it. And in that silence, that warm, unpressured, completely accepting silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Full. Not because something had been added, but because for the first time I'd stopped pouring. I'm 73 now. I've had 12 years since that Wednesday evening to think about what went wrong and what I've learned from it. Here's what I know. External validation is a drug. It provides a genuine neurological reward, a hit of satisfaction that feels real because it is real, chemically speaking. But like any drug, it requires increasing doses to produce the same effect. The promotion that thrilled you at 30 barely registers at 40. The salary that felt extraordinary at 40 is baseline at 50. The approval that sustained you for weeks eventually sustains you for hours, then minutes, then not at all. You build tolerance, and then you build dependence. And then you're 61 years old, sitting in your driveway holding an award that means nothing, wondering where your life went. The bucket metaphor is the most accurate description I've ever found for what this feels like. You pour and pour and pour, effort, time, energy, sacrifice, years of your life, into something that structurally cannot hold what you're putting in. The holes aren't flaws in the bucket, they're features. External validation has holes by design because it was never meant to hold your self-worth. It wasn't built for that purpose. Using it for that purpose is like using a colander to carry soup. The tool is wrong for the job, and no amount of effort will change that. Self-worth, real, durable, sustainable self-worth, can only come from one place, inside, from the quiet, unglamorous, deeply uncomfortable decision to accept that you are enough exactly as you are, not because of what you've accomplished, not because of what you own, not because of what other people think of you, but because you exist, because you are a complete human being whose value doesn't fluctuate based on quarterly results or social comparisons or the expression on your father's face when you tell him your salary. That sounds simple. It's the hardest thing I've ever tried to do, and I'm still working on it. At 73, after everything I've been through, I still catch the old instinct firing. The urge to measure, compare, perform, prove. It's quieter now. It doesn't run the show anymore. But it's still there, like a scar that aches when the weather changes. If you're young and ambitious and hungry and driven, if you're building a career or chasing a goal, or working towards something you believe will finally make you feel complete, I'm not going to tell you to stop. Ambition isn't the enemy. Achievement isn't the problem. Working hard and wanting more aren't diseases that need curing. The danger isn't in the pursuit. The danger is in the belief that the pursuit will fix something inside you, that the next level, the next number, the next recognition will quiet the voice that says you're not enough. It won't. It never will. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you can start pursuing things for the right reasons, because they interest you, because they challenge you, because they align with who you actually are, rather than who you think you need to be in order to deserve your own respect. Stop pouring into the bucket. Patch the holes first. The holes are the beliefs you absorb before you are old enough to question them. The idea that your worth depends on your output. The notion that resting is laziness. The conviction that you must earn the right to feel good about yourself every single day, and that one bad quarter can erase everything you've built. Those beliefs are the holes, and no amount of achievement will fill a bucket that's leaking from the bottom. Catherine and I have had the best 12 years of our marriage since that Wednesday night. Not because everything became perfect, but because I finally stopped performing for an audience that wasn't in the room and started being present with the person who was. I'm 73. My hands shake when I pour my coffee. My knees ache when it rains. I'm slower than I used to be in every measurable way, but I'm full. Genuinely, quietly, sustainably full. Not because I achieved something new, but because I finally stopped believing I needed to. The bucket doesn't have holes anymore, not because I fixed it, because I put it down. And it turns out that everything I'd been pouring and desperately trying to hold on to was already there, already inside me, already enough. It always was. Put down the bucket. You're already full. You just can't feel it yet because you won't stop pouring. That's all I've got for today.